Little one, yes.
Welcome, everybody, to the Freud Museum in London, the final home of Sigmund and Anna Freud. Sigmund Freud, of course, the founder of psychoanalysis, and his youngest daughter, Anna, who became a pioneer in the field of child psychoanalysis. I am joining you today from the perfectly preserved study of Sigmund Freud here in the Hampstead area of North London. Thank you very much to the Nafsaniyoun Centre for inviting me to take part in the 2023 Millennia Conference. Thank you very much, Ali and Hiba. I wish I could be there in person to join you at it must be a splendid occasion. I have previously visited Lebanon and had a wonderful time exploring Beirut, Byblos, Sidon, Beit Edin, and other places, and I hope to visit the Nabu Museum too next time I come to Lebanon. The Freud Museum in London is very much a place of secular intellectual pilgrimage, visited by around 30,000 people a year and many, many more online. We also run a thriving program of events, exhibitions, courses, and conferences in person and online. If you haven't visited us before, please do, or you can take the virtual tour online via the Freud Museum website. Sigmund Freud fled Nazi-occupied Vienna in June 1938, together with his wife Martha and other members of his family, including his youngest daughter Anna, who in many ways became the carer at the end of his life. By the time Freud came to London, he had been suffering from cancer of the jaw really for 15 years. Anna also became the custodian of her father's legacy after his death. She co-edited many of his works, and she also carefully preserved his study and his home so that it would one day become a museum. So all of this is here really thanks to Anna Freud. Freud left behind his apartment, study, and consulting room in Berggasse in Vienna, which had been his family home for 47 years, and which today serves as the Sigmund Freud Museum in Vienna. There are incidentally 3 of Freud's homes which are open today as museums, here in London, in Vienna, and also in Przybor in the Czech Republic, where you can visit the house of Freud's birth. Freud also famously transported from Vienna to London the entire contents of his library, some of which you can see here, his collection of art and antiquities, which we'll talk about in a moment, his furnishings, including his writing desk and his strange ergonomic chair, which are behind me, the oriental rugs and decorations, some of which you will see behind me here, and even the very bookshelves in this room were brought here from Berggasse in Vienna in 1938, when Freud was forced to flee. Most famously of all, Freud brought his original psychoanalytic couch, which I hope you can see behind me here. If not, I'll give you a proper tour later. And this couch had been given to him as a gift from a patient in 1891 and used by him from that time until the end of his life here in London to treat his patients. Over 500 patients in all have reclined on this couch behind me to be psychoanalyzed by Sigmund Freud. Just think of the many, many stories this piece of furniture has to tell. The most marvelous thing about the couch and about the whole of the special room in this house is the fact that it's personally curated by Sigmund Freud himself. It has his stamp, his signature over everything. What we see here is not a museum-curated installation or a recreation of history. This is the real thing, a time capsule, if you like. And the study that I am sitting in is preserved almost exactly as Sigmund Freud left it when he died here in this room on the 23rd of September, 1939. Now, I mentioned that over 500 patients have been psychoanalyzed on the couch. However, in London, Freud only saw 4 patients. And that's because by the time Freud came to England, he was really at the end of a very long, distinguished life. And he was here for only 1 year exactly, in fact, from September 1938 to September 1939. By the time Freud came here, he was really too ill to psychoanalyze many patients. That said, he did meet some important people while he was in London, and he remained intellectually active right till the end of his life. When you come and visit us, you will see on his desk the logbook that he meticulously kept right up until his very last day. The people Freud met in London include none other than Virginia Woolf, the celebrated modernist author, and her husband Leonard Woolf, founders and owners of the Hogarth Publishing Press, who since 1924 had been the first publishers of Freud's work in England. The purpose of their meeting here in January 1939, over a polite cup of tea, very English of course, in Freud's study, was to talk business and to discuss Freud's last major work titled Moses and Monotheism, which he completed here in 1939 before his death. Moses and Monotheism espoused Freud's then somewhat controversial thesis that the origins of Judaism can be traced back to 15th century BC Egypt and to the time of the pharaoh Akhenaten, the first monotheistic ruler of Egypt. Leonard Woolf later recalled that he tried to persuade Freud to remove the word monotheism from the title because he didn't think it would be very appetizing to the English reading public. But Freud was adamant that the title was not to be changed. Whilst living in London, Freud also met Salvador Dali, the pioneering surrealist artist who'd been introduced to Freud by his friend Stefan Zweig. Dali was incredibly thrilled, honored, excited. Who wouldn't be? Absolutely amazed to have the opportunity to meet one of his foremost heroes here in London, and he later recounted the experience in his 1942 autobiography, The Secret Life of Salvador Dali. But Dali's enthusiasm was not reciprocated by Freud, who had really little or no interest in contemporary art or in Salvador Dali's work. I think he found him rather silly, to be honest. And a famous portrait sketch of Freud produced by Dali following their meeting in London, and which today belongs to the Freud Museum, was never part of Sigmund or later Anna Freud's collection, and didn't officially join our collection until after the founding of the museum in London in 1986. And Dali only showed Zweig the portrait. He never gave it to him, to which Zweig replied that he shouldn't show it to Freud because of its deathly appearance. He didn't think that Freud would like it very much. And that's why when you come here and visit the Freud Museum, you'll find the Dali portrait upstairs on the first floor of the house, rather than in Freud's study. You'll also find works by other contemporary artists upstairs, including Lucian Freud, who was Sigmund Freud's grandson. Incidentally, Anna Freud was the owner of an early work by Lucian Freud titled Palm Tree, which she didn't seem to like very much because we discovered it in the attic of the house some years ago, and we had to have it later authenticated as a work by Lucian Freud. In Freud's study, you will see a famous portrait sculpture of Freud made by him, or made for him rather, by the artist Oscar Niemann. And this is quite unusual for Freud to have a work of contemporary art that Freud actually liked and which he was happy with. By all accounts, he was impressed by the likeness that Oscar Niemann had managed to capture of him. And he duly brought that sculpture with him from London, from Vienna to London. But I know it's frustrating for a conference on the relationship between art and psychology to come to the realization that Freud himself apparently had little interest in contemporary visual art. But what did excite Sigmund Freud was literature and ancient art or archaeology. He cited Shakespeare and Goethe as two of his foremost influences, and he once boasted that he'd read more books on archaeology than psychology. This may be a slight exaggeration, but certainly if you look around Freud's study as it is preserved here, you do get a sense that you are not only in his consulting room, but that you are also in his laboratory, if you like, his engine room of ideas. And archaeology is absolutely integral to the development of Freud's psychoanalytic theories, as we explored in our temporary exhibition, Freud's Antiquity, Object, Idea, Desire, here at the museum earlier this year. Now, you might be surprised to hear that Freud started collecting antique objects relatively late in life. It was only in 1896, at the age of 40, and after the death of his father, that Freud threw himself into this new hobby, which became an obsession, a maniacal obsession for him throughout the second half of his life. And Freud often compared the craft of the psychoanalyst to the work of the archaeologist. Both are engaged in a process of digging, chipping away, unearthing, and discovering hidden truths, even unappetizing truths. And this was a metaphor that Freud drew on several times throughout his psychoanalytic career. Interestingly, it was also in 1896, the year that Freud began to collect archaeological objects, that he published the very word psychoanalysis for the very first time in print. And it was also the year of the birth of his daughter Anna, who Freud later claimed to be as old as psychoanalysis itself. From 1896 then, until almost the end of his life, Freud assembled a collection of 2,500 antique objects, most of which were brought from Vienna to London. I say most because a small number of items were left in Vienna and a small number of items were sent back to Vienna by Anna Freud when the Sigmund Freud Museum in Vienna was founded in 1971. But the vast majority of Freud's collection is here. And on Freud's desk behind me, which I'll show you in a moment, you'll find the very favorite objects that Freud would like at any one time, around 50 or so. And what I'll do is I'll just take you on a tour around, if I may, so that you can see Freud's desk. And I'm giving you a panorama of the study. So you can get a flavor of it. And to this day, Sigmund Freud's study, which was carefully preserved by Anna following his death in 1939, and which, since 1986, has formed the core of the Freud Museum here in London, is a walk-in compendium of ancient curiosities, a living testament to his intertwined obsessions with psychoanalysis and archaeology. Freud's study allows us to glimpse the vanishing point between these apparently parallel but ultimately convergent disciplines. Thank you.